you also mentioned that two areas of there are two potential areas. One is collision avoidance, and the other one is active debris removal. So, what is your opinion? Should we have more focus on how to keep our environment, how to keep the sustainable environment, and how to avoid the situations that we create additional debris? Or should we still invest into technologies how to remove things from orbit? So does it make sense to invest in removing things, or should we just invest all the money into how to keep the situation as it is and not to get worse? So what is the best option?
The best option is to do both. We have to, and this is, I think, very broadly understood since the enactment of the space debris mitigation guidelines, which have been emanating from the UN corpus. But this is not enough. Even if we keep the level of space debris, there is one very big threat. And these are the really big objects which might be hit by smaller pieces and then would explode into thousands or hundreds of thousands of smaller pieces, which would then provide for a situation which we know as the Kessler syndrome, with a cascading effect of collisions. And these are, for example, there are actually a few European such large objects, ENVISAT or ERS, all on the Earth observation orbits around 800 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers high. And we actually have to remove them. And we have understood that. It's just a matter of how to do that and when to do that. And I'm optimistic that the first studies and also the first pilot projects, we might call it, will be successful so that we can undertake these initiatives which are really necessary and which we expect also from ourselves.
For example, me as a policymaker here in Estonia, what should I do, for example, to help the industry to develop different technologies or create new business models? So how should European policymakers, what should we do? So what's your recommendation?
Well, three elements. The first is to set up the right regulatory framework. It is, of course, a European coordinated matter, but it also already starts on the national level with national legislation and below that regulations. The second point is to subscribe to European programs, either push the European Commission to initiate programs or to participate in already existing ESA programs, because ESA is way ahead and all member states are invited to participate in these programs. And the third one is to identify what kind of either technologies or business models might come from your country, and then on a national level support them in order to be competitive on the European level.
What would be your main message to venture capitalists? Because seeing private sector developing new business models and technologies in this area requires venture capital. So why should venture capital invest into, for example, space traffic management or related technologies?
Well, this is a perspective investment at this point in time. We might first have to have the regulatory provisions for that, so that it's really interesting for venture capital. Let me bring the example. If we have a kind of, let's say, request, demand, or obligation even to remove objects, this would be then a opportunity and the starting point also for much more activities for the removal, which would also be potentially then services provided on a commercial basis. And there, only then, venture capital would certainly be interested to fund and to support such ventures. But as I said, the regulatory framework, in my view, has to come first, but we are very close to that because the states have understood that only nice words or kind incentives are not enough. It has to be a top-down obligation.
Yes, you mentioned national space law already in your question, and also in Estonia we are working on a national space law, and it's going well ahead. But if I'm talking, for example, to the industry, then always we have the question about over-regulation. So can we regulate over in case of space traffic management? What is your opinion here?
Well, honestly, I see more the threat of under-regulation. If the governments cannot or do not want to agree on minimum standards and norms, since a key element of STM is national legislation and regulation, as you put it, and implementation also, we will, for the time being, have to apply a bottom-up approach, in particular for space traffic management. My conviction is, however, to set up a legal architecture, no over-regulation, a legal architecture appropriate and comparable with air traffic or frequency management, as it is handled by ICAO or respectively the ITU. But this might take 1 or even 2 decades, but this then can help really shaping the regulatory needs and also avoiding that here or there we have over and there we have under-regulation.
In Europe and globally, we have many countries right now who are working on national space law. So what are your recommendations here? How should we address maybe space traffic management in the next years? So should there be space traffic management already mentioned in it? So how can we foresee the developments? Or does it mean that in the next 5-10 years we have to update our national law again?
Well, that might be possible. We are now discussing space traffic management, not simply on the national level, but here in Europe on a regional level. And we also have the agenda item on space traffic management on the global level in UN COCOAS. And I would say we already share as a common understanding amongst the governments that space traffic management cannot work unilaterally. You need a multilateral understanding. Traffic rules in outer space make really only sense when they are shared by all participants, really absolutely all participants. We do not have islands in space where you can drive on the other side of the highways than the others, as I said. This is a really strong basis for setting up globally developed, accepted, and then implemented rules of the road, which are rules of behavior in outer space.
So if Estonia wants to be a good player in the space sector, also developing space traffic management applications and new business models in this area, we need to have a space law, right?
Yes, indeed. A space law is absolutely necessary. Space laws nowadays go together with a space strategy. Space laws are needed for authorizing private activities, and they can also put either burdens or incentives on industry to do this, do that, or be the beneficiary of the one or the other activity and action of the state. But they can also contain safety regulations regulations which deal with the prevention and the mitigation of space debris, and in perspective, national space legislations, and this is what you asked before, will have to reflect the traffic rules and implement on the national level the traffic rules which have to be worked out on the international, on the multilateral level.
Okay. And one of the main questions, or the biggest questions ever, is will there ever be a globally recognized space traffic management platform? Can something like that be built, or is it just a dream?
No, I'm absolutely optimistic. You see, I worked on the first international interdisciplinary study, which was presented in 2006 on space traffic management. Now we have 15 years since then. We have drafted a second follow-up study in 2018. Even 3-5 years ago, absolutely nobody talked really about space traffic management. It was something for experts. And well, it slipped, as I previously indicated, here or there, even into laws or regulations. Now everybody is talking about it. We see that the politicians also here in Berlin, but also all over Europe, they use the term space traffic management as if they have grown up with it. And this also shows that it is something reasonable, that it is something which is needed and which is accepted. Of course, now we really have to do the hard work of finding out what is acceptable in the end, not hopefully the smallest denominator, but hopefully a good denominator. And this will then lead us to something which, and this is important to mention again and again, which serves everybody. Everybody will benefit from space traffic management, from a global space traffic management regime. And I'm very glad that we possibly were able to contribute to this understanding, which opened the door now for concrete discussions and deliberations.
From your first study in 2006, it took more than a decade to come to the point where we are today. So what do you think, how long will it take until we have a platform or something real?
I already said that we are still at a stage where it's not too late. Imagine that we already have the Kessler syndrome. Then people would say, do a space traffic management regime next year. And we might then also say, well, we don't need an STM anymore because it's too late. But this is not the case. And therefore, I'm very optimistic that we come to terms in a reasonable time frame. We now work on a regional basis. This might take 2 or 3 years to have a very good and solid position, which will also go into international deliberations. They will come in parallel. We see that. We see it with national legislation in the United States. But we might expect, as I said, not yet clear, but we might expect something from other big space powers. And we see that other countries, space powers in the medium range, like Japan, are also working on that. So this makes me optimistic that we then, on the multilateral level, first possibly in UN caucus, but then ultimately in a global state conference, might establish such an architecture for space traffic management, which will then resemble to ICAO or ITU.
Exchanging information, data notification among satellite operators and governments is one of the key activities in space traffic management. What is your main message to governments, why should they start exchanging information, or government organization information among each other? I'm not talking only about, for example, Germany or Estonia, but on a more broader level globally. And also, what should be the message to satellite constellations or private companies? Why should they give away their operational, for example, information? So what are the benefits in exchanging information for governments and private sector?
Well, it's obvious. If you share the information about where you are, the others, who then also know where they are, might be able to avoid collisions. If you leave the others completely in the dark where you are and where they are, then anything can happen. This is what I call the self-interest of all the participants in spaceflight, which brings us to a point that sharing information is the basis for space traffic management. Of course, there are security concerns, and these are taken into account already now, even by those countries which very broadly share information, like the United States with European countries, for example, for which we are certainly very grateful. In the future, we have to have a data set and information on what is going on in outer space in order to provide for all the participants on an equal footing a better and a good understanding of what is going on in outer space, so that they then can also shape their operations accordingly. So I'm also optimistic that this basic building block for space traffic management can be organized on a multilateral basis, but this requires, of course, first of all, additional technical provisions and inputs and installations, and then a careful consideration of the governance and the organization of this.
Let's say we have a platform for space traffic management. Who should be operating it, or who should be the owner, or should it be a decentralized solution?
Well, this is something which is completely open, and also which is something to be discussed amongst the states. There are various models, and this is good that we have various models. I mentioned a few of them already, and that the states, and it will be the governments who will decide on that, that they can check, analyze, and then decide on the basis of a very thorough deliberation on how to shape the governance. I think we are in a good position not to make mistakes, also not to simply find the smallest denominator, because we have very good examples, very good best practices on which we can build.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the answers. And how we are going to exchange information between different players and guard the data, these are exactly the topics we are going to discuss during our conference this year and also over the next years. So who is interested to learn more about different technologies and how can space traffic management be solved in technology point of view, so please join our conference this year and also in the next years, where the topic will be discussed more in detail. And thank you, Kai-Uwe, for your time today. Do you have any final message you want to maybe say out in the end?
Well, thank you, Paul, for inviting me. This was a really inspirational discussion we were able to lead, and I want again congratulate you to take the initiative for this conference. And I very much hope also that you continue with a series of such conferences, because there are so many topics, there are so many issues to be discussed, and Estonia is a fantastic moderator in that. And you can also build on your fantastic and top-level expertise in the cyber field. And I'm sure everybody in Europe, but also abroad, will be listening extremely carefully on what you will say and what you will bring out of these conferences for the common benefit. Thank you.
So thank you, Kai-Uwe, and I hope we can meet next time here in Tallinn for the next conference in 2022. So thank you, everyone, and now let's see how the panel discussions are going, and we are also providing a wrap-up article about the conference and about the conclusions. So see you at the next podcasts or then during the conference here in Tallinn. Thank you.